Hello and welcome to Real Cheating Story. You're never too young to have your heart broken, and I would learn many decades later that you're never too old for it, either. I stood in the shower, hot water cascading over me as I cried for Bonnie, my lost love. Back in third grade, my former best friend, Alan, had seemingly dedicated his life to ruining mine, becoming my worst enemy. I studied diligently, while Alan never did. One afternoon, I refused to let him copy my answers on a spelling test. When our grades came back, he flunked. Miss Taylor, our teacher, suggested he could achieve better results if he actually studied. This was Alan's first taste of criticism, and his ego was shattered. He ran out of the classroom in tears, furious at me for a perceived slight. I was the shortest kid in our class, Alan was the tallest and better looking, but I was smarter. He was rich, I was poor. After school, he challenged me to a fist fight. I warned him that while he would win, I would break his nose, and that stopped him in his tracks. He declared it wasn't worth his time to fight me because, as he sneered, everyone knew I was a loser. This was the first but not the last time I was called a name I didn't fully understand. Bonnie had been my girlfriend since kindergarten. A few days later, Alan taunted me, asking if I really liked her. He led me over to the water fountain where Bonnie was drinking, and then claimed her for himself. I was crushed, running away before the tears could escape. Instead of taking the school bus, I walked home, tears streaming down my face. When I confided in my older sister, she shocked me with her honesty. She asked why any girl would choose me over Alan, who was tall and handsome. I felt betrayed, and then my mother weighed in, saying I had to accept that I wasn't as attractive as Alan. I learned that I might only be a second or third choice for girls. This was a heavy realization, and I decided I would have to navigate life alone. It was also the last day I loved Bonnie, my sister, or my mother. My parents were divorced, and I longed to live with my father, who often took my sister out but never included me. When I called him, he revealed that I wasn't his biological son. This news hit hard, and it made sense why I had always felt like an outsider. I asked my mother about my father, but she refused to discuss it, and when I pressed her, she slapped me. I felt numb, unable to cry or scream. Instead of dwelling on my pain, I resolved to prove everyone wrong and build a great life for myself. It took many years until I met my wife, Susie, and learned to trust a woman again after the heartbreak with Bonnie. I began immersing myself in books, trying to escape my past and live vicariously through the heroes of the stories. As I improved my reading skills, I lost myself in novels, imagining myself as a brave secret agent or an astronaut surrounded by adventure. For a while, reality held little appeal compared to the thrilling worlds I explored in literature. Eventually, I discovered a love for the classics, often keeping a dictionary close by to help with the unfamiliar words. The happiest moments of my childhood were spent getting lost in books and movies. It's no surprise that I became a professor of classical literature at a local community college, where I occasionally taught a course on comic books and their influence on youth culture. My master's thesis argued that children's moral perspectives were shaped significantly by the comics they read, especially when shared with friends. Some departments found my thesis frivolous, which may explain why no four-year college would hire me. After Bonnie left me for Alan, he soon dropped her, and she tried to return to me during recess. I refused to speak to her again. In fourth grade, I walked to school with Olivia, but one day she informed me that she had walked with Alan. Of course, he dropped her after 2 weeks, and when she came to me heartbroken, expecting sympathy, I could only laugh. By sixth grade, I had a birthday party at a local ice cream parlor, intentionally not inviting Alan. Yet he showed up anyway, and the same pattern unfolded. Carol left with him and later cried on my shoulder about how he broke her heart. I started to understand Alan's motivations more clearly. In high school, I attended Central High, a magnet school for smart kids, where I met Linda. I thought I was safe from Alan's interference, but I was mistaken. When I asked Linda out, she informed me she was now dating Alan. His father was a wealthy dentist who bought him a Porsche and expensive clothes to make up for his absence. I, on the other hand, wore jeans and t-shirts and relied on the bus for transportation. I often wondered why girls preferred the boy in the Porsche over me, but I never met a girl who seemed to care about anything deeper. At 15, I dated Iris and trusted her completely. When we were 16, I took her ice skating, unaware that Alan worked at the rink. Although we had a wonderful time, he flirted with her, skating circles around us. If Alan had tried anything, I would have confronted him without hesitation. I didn't care about the consequences. He noticed the look on my face when he attempted to skate with Iris and wisely skated away, probably to avoid losing his job operating the Zamboni. All the girls swooned over him. One day, as Iris and I were walking home and crossing an icy street, a car slid out of control toward us. I could have easily gotten out of the way, but I grabbed Iris's arm and pushed her to safety, taking the hit myself. I woke up hours later in the hospital, bandaged and in pain, with casts on my arm and leg. I spent 2 days there, and Iris visited both times. I felt like a hero, believing every girl wanted one, but I was mistaken. Iris criticized me for not getting to safety in time, despite my explanation that I prioritized her safety over my own. Using crutches for several weeks, I took Iris to the movies, but she seemed embarrassed to be seen with me. The following Saturday, she claimed to have the flu and couldn't go to a movie. Not wanting to go without her, I decided to show my concern by bringing her a gallon of chicken soup from a delicatessen. I hobbled to her house, but when Iris appeared at the top of the stairs in a prom dress, freshly styled hair, and makeup, she looked horrified. She screamed for me to leave just as Alan arrived in a tuxedo for the prom. In a moment of anger, I poured the soup over Iris's head, watching as it dripped down her face and ruined her dress. Alan reacted by punching me, but I was so filled with rage that I didn't even feel it. I retaliated quickly, using my crutches to push back. I kicked him in the knee as I made my escape. Though I didn't expect lifelong love for saving Iris, I also didn't anticipate the betrayal that followed. We continued to see each other in high school, but we never spoke again. My family situation forced me to attend a local college and live at home, while I heard that Alan had gone to an expensive party school far away. I had grown over 6 inches in the past 2 years, and although Alan was still taller, I was no longer the smallest kid around. Books became my escape, much cheaper than therapy, as I worked in the college library. There, I met Susie, a fellow bookworm 2 years younger than me. Everyone called her Susie Q after the song. We lunched together, discussing Kafka and literature, and one day I blurted out how badly I wanted to kiss her. When our lips finally met, I felt a sense of trust that I hadn't felt since I was 8. I was absolutely certain I wouldn't lose Susie to Alan. We dated from September to Christmas, and I had never been happier, finally letting my guard down. Happy was a feeling I rarely experienced. I introduced Susie to my family, and my mother, never one for tact or encouragement, blurted out that she never thought I would find a girl as pretty as Susie who would like me. Then, with a puzzled look, she asked Susie what she saw in me. Susie took my hand and explained that she thought I was cute, and unlike many men she knew, I was someone she could trust with her heart. Hearing this made me so happy that I nearly cried. My mother was visibly shocked that a girl could love me. I think it challenged her worldview. Both of our families had been affected by infidelity. My father divorced my mother due to her repeated cheating, while Susie's mother left her father for the same reason. This shared experience created a bond between us, as we both understood that loving someone you couldn't trust was not only difficult but perhaps impossible. we believed that love without trust was merely an illusion. One day, while I was sitting at Dave and Harry's sub shop during Christmas break, waiting for my cheesesteak, Alan and 3 of his friends swaggered over. "Hey, loser," he taunted. "I hear you have a new girlfriend who's a real skank. Can't wait to meet her and take her away from you." I stood my ground, telling him that I was going to marry Susie and that I didn't think she would jeopardize that with someone like him. Alan scoffed, claiming there wasn't a girl on earth who would stay with a poor, ugly loser like me. I confidently responded that I had found someone who already hated him. "What's her name?" he sneered. "Susie," I said, and at that moment, she stepped up behind him and slapped him across the face. "Watch who you call a skank, big brother," she said as she sat down next to me. "You're as big a jackass as our father." Alan was left speechless and walked away, clearly flustered. Susie and I have been married for over 40 years, and we only encountered Alan during Thanksgiving dinners at my mother-in-law's. I often thank him for clearing away all the unfaithful, two-timing losers I once liked, allowing me to truly appreciate Susie when we first met. One evening, after we had both indulged in some bourbon, I asked Alan why he had devoted so much of his childhood to tormenting me. He smiled and admitted it was because everyone loved him and despised me, making it easy and enjoyable for him. He considered it a hobby. Alan had already been divorced 3 times, with a son and daughter who wanted nothing to do with him. This broken family dynamic seemed to chip away at his self-centered heart, which surprised me. He was great at starting relationships but struggled to maintain them. Few women wanted a cheating husband, no matter how charming he was. What truly frustrated me about Alan was that he had gotten in on cryptocurrencies early and made a fortune, which he never hesitated to flaunt during our Thanksgiving gatherings. Even after his death, it felt like Alan managed to take one last shot at me. I could almost imagine him looking up from wherever he was, enjoying my misery. Other than my wife Susie, my standard poodle Vesta is my best friend. She's warm, loving, adorable, and fiercely loyal, smart as a whip and well-trained. I affectionately call her my little private investigator. Like many people, I talk to my dog, but unlike most, I truly listen to her. One day, she led me to the house of my wife's boyfriend, although I didn't realize it at the time. Susie and I are both over 60, having met in college and been married for over 40 years. So, the thought that she would cheat on me was unimaginable. There had been a couple of suspicious incidents years ago, a close call with our next-door neighbor's charming brother and another possible one with her personal trainer, but I never had proof. I attributed my worries to paranoia, but I always kept an eye out. Susie's best friend from junior high, Lynn, was stunning and could have had any man she wanted. Tragically, she passed away from AIDS about 30 years ago, which I believed was a major reason for Susie's commitment to our marriage. Her fear of other diseases also played a part. I thought we both loved and cared for each other. She looked after me after my hip surgery, and I did the same for her after her knee surgery. This might not match the youthful idea of love, but I believed it was a true reflection of love for people our age. Before retirement, we both taught English literature at a community college. Now, I volunteer to tutor students at the local high school and help them with college applications. I also take Vesta to local nursing homes once a week to lift the residents' spirits. Most of my time there is spent listening to their stories about beloved pets from long ago. It may sound overly optimistic, but bringing joy to these people brings me immense happiness as well. I've noticed that when Vesta is especially kind to someone in the nursing home, it often signals that they are nearing the end. She seems to sense it, and her affection shines through. Have I mentioned that besides Susie, Vesta is the kindest and most compassionate female I've ever known? Now that I'm retired and have more free time, I've developed a penchant for watching gangster movies. I've nearly memorized the dialogue from the first 2 Godfather films, having watched each of them countless times. The third one didn't quite do it for me, so I only watched it 20 times. While I indulged in crime dramas, Susie's passion lay in reading romance novels, those stories where a young man sweeps an older woman off her feet and whisks her away to a beautiful villa in Tuscany, only to reveal he's secretly a wealthy nobleman. The notion seemed so far-fetched to me. For the past year, she's been trying to write one of these novels herself, featuring a 60-year-old cookbook author and her young Italian lover, with the working title A Taste of Tuscany. When I jokingly asked if it was about something else, she didn't laugh. She was learning Italian to incorporate some of the dialogue into her story. Writing hasn't been easy for her, and she joked about needing to do some research with a younger man. I wasn't sure how serious she was, but the comment struck me as unsettling rather than funny. When I look at her, I still see the 18-year-old girl I fell in love with. To me, she's still beautiful, even if others might see an overweight 60-year-old grandmother. 6 months ago, her brother Alan passed away unexpectedly, not due to a jealous husband, but from heart issues. I mentioned, perhaps insensitively, that I was surprised to learn he even had one. Now that he was gone, Susie spoke of her brother with such love and admiration, it left me flabbergasted. After years of disdain, her sudden change was shocking. I couldn't help but feel that his death was his final act of revenge on me. He left her a significant amount of cryptocurrency, and soon after, everything in our marriage started to unravel. Susie engaged Tony, a new attorney, to navigate the tax implications of her inheritance. Our longtime friend Barry had retired, leaving her to hire this charming, young lawyer who spoke a few words of Italian. While it made me groan, it also seemed to win her over. I soon discovered that not all lawyers are created equal. Tony was not someone I felt comfortable with. My father, an honest and ethical lawyer, had always advised me about the darker side of the profession. Though he wasn't my biological dad, I loved and respected him deeply, and his passing still stung after all these years. He once spent $100 on a Christmas gift for my sister, leaving me feeling overlooked and unappreciated. In my childhood, I often felt neglected, and while I wouldn't call myself a lunatic, the experiences could have easily driven me to that point. They say what doesn't destroy you makes you stronger, and if that's true, I should be invincible by now. On Tony's desk sat a photograph of his wife, Trudy, a fashion model who seemed high maintenance. The decor of his office was adorned with posters of luxury cars, illustrating his dreams of racing. Meanwhile, my dreams were far simpler, lying on a warm beach with Susie, enjoying the breeze and a couple of cold drinks. I didn't need a fancy car. My old BMW was fast enough for me, even if my reflexes weren't what they used to be. As we grew older, we faced the reality of losing friends, which had become a painful routine for us. Susie often found herself in tears over these losses, particularly when she forgot that her dear friend Judy had passed away just last month. The weight of mortality pressed heavily on her, and no amount of comfort seemed to ease her anxiety. Desiring adventure in her life, Susie began to sing an old song about living life to the fullest, signaling a shift in her perspective. The first thing she did with her brother's inheritance was to trade her nearly new Toyota for a bright red convertible Porsche, claiming she deserved it. I suggested a more understated Mercedes, but she dismissed that idea, insisting it was an old lady's car. Soon after, she underwent various cosmetic procedures, aiming to reclaim her youth. While I wanted to support her, the changes left me feeling like I barely recognized her. I became increasingly worried that I might be the next one to be left behind, especially since Susie often came up with excuses to avoid intimacy. It seemed like she had more reasons than anyone could count. For the last 6 months, she would spend an hour getting ready, putting on makeup and styling her hair, before slipping into yoga pants and heading out to walk our dog. She returned home looking exhausted but cheerful, while our dog appeared suspiciously unwearied after these supposedly long walks. Our neighborhood is just one street about 2 miles long, and during our outings, Susie only showed a keen interest in certain houses, namely those of my sister and son. She would dash up their steps without hesitation, but never to any unfamiliar places. One cloudy day, while she was at a hairdresser's appointment, I took the dog for a walk and noticed her running up to a stranger's house. I made a mental note of the address, though I hoped it wouldn't be necessary. Despite my growing concerns, I didn't want to confront Susie directly. She didn't go out with friends often, and she wasn't secretive with her phone. There were no unfamiliar numbers on her call logs, just family, her lawyer, and our pharmacy where we spent too much on medications for her various health issues. That evening, I set the mood with 2 glasses of expensive champagne in front of the fireplace while Frank Sinatra sang softly. I took a deep breath and asked, "Susie, you've seemed a bit distant lately. Is everything okay between us?" She sipped her champagne and replied, "I'm just stressed with all this estate business." I leaned in to kiss her, but she pulled back. "Why are you attacking me?" "I'm not in the mood," she said, and my heart sank. Thoughts raced through my mind. Was there a way to uncover the truth without being confrontational? I considered various tactics, but they all seemed invasive and uncomfortable. I decided to try tracking her using the Find My app on her phone, only to discover she had left it in her dresser. Undeterred, I bought an Apple AirTag and discreetly attached it to our dog's collar. 2 days later, I let her take the dog for a walk and gave her a 20-minute head start before checking the app. To my dismay, I found that she had removed the tracker and put it away. Score 1 for Susie, but I wasn't giving up. I drove to the house I had noted earlier and, standing on my toes to peek through the small window, I saw an empty living room. I called for my dog, and Vesta responded with excited barks. When she came running to me, I couldn't help but feel a rush of hope. But then I saw Susie and her lawyer inside, and I was struck by the reality of what I was witnessing. In that moment, everything I felt for her seemed to evaporate. I took photos with my phone, my heart racing. I knelt down, painfully aware of my arthritic knees, and yelled through the mail slot, "You can keep her. I'm divorcing her. Just let my dog go, or I'll break down the door." To my relief, the sliding door opened just long enough for Vesta to run into my arms, showering me with affection. I knew I would have my revenge on that lawyer, no matter the cost. He had destroyed my marriage, and I was determined to dismantle his life, even if it was tempting to resort to drastic measures. Susie's brother had indeed laughed last at me, using his wealth to ruin what I had built. I took my dog to the beach, where I spent an hour crying while he happily chased a stick. After returning home, I made an appointment with a divorce lawyer and loaded my SUV with my belongings. I called my oldest son, asking for 2 favors. Could I stay with him for a few days, and could he avoid asking why? Then I cried again, tears for my lost marriage, for my foolishness, and for the uncertain future ahead. I dreaded the thought of being 60 and single. I had never wanted to know how my wife inherited the house from her late father. It belonged to her, but I would have left anyway to escape the memories it held. A few hours later, my soon-to-be ex-wife returned home. "Why?" I asked. With a smirk, she replied, "Let me be brutally honest. I'm 60, with high blood pressure and diabetes. Who knows how much longer I have? Now that I'm wealthy, why would I waste my remaining years with someone like you? I deserve better, and now I can afford it." It felt like a betrayal that cut deeply. I wanted to argue, but her words rang true. I asked her how many other men she had been with during our marriage. "Only 4, she said, unashamed. Susie was a cheater, just like her brother. "Well, at least I know who my father is," she shot back, driving the knife deeper. I resisted the urge to call her an idiot. It wouldn't lead anywhere. How long do you think your new man will stick around once he gets what he wants? I challenged. He loves me, she insisted, more to convince herself. I couldn't help but feel crushed. I had lost not just my wife, but also the guiding principles I had believed in, that being a good, faithful husband would be reciprocated. I felt like such a fool for turning down the advances of several women over the years. Some people manage to lie and cheat without consequences, but I've never been one of them, and I never wanted to be. Even when a pretty student walked by 100 feet away on campus, my wife could sense it. I had the opposite of a poker face. If I had ever cheated, she would have known the moment I returned home. If she hadn't figured it out, I would have likely fallen to my knees, confessing and begging for forgiveness. I've always been amazed at how some people are such talented liars, able to get away with it. That's not a talent I possess, nor do I want it. While I'm not claiming I've never told a lie, I'm not George Washington. I prefer honesty. It makes my life easier and less stressful, especially with my knees the way they are. Stairs have become my mortal enemies. I rented a ground floor, dog-friendly condo in a complex filled with 60-year-old divorcees and widows and filed for divorce. Though I'm not Catholic, I reached out to Father Peter, the owner and bartender at OMAL's Irish pub. I confessed my troubles, and he humorously prescribed 2 bloody Hail Marys and suggested I find a younger partner. The first part of his prescription only gave me a headache and a hangover. Once the hangover subsided, I visited a cannabis store. I shared my story with the saleswoman, who recommended some infused gummies to help ease my pain. After returning home and taking one, I rummaged through moving boxes until I found an old Jefferson Airplane album and a turntable. An hour later, as the cannabis took effect, I was enjoying chocolate chip cookies and singing along with Grace Slick, convinced I sounded great, though my dog howled in protest. Lost in the music, I thought about my wife calling to beg for forgiveness. Would I be noble and take her back, or would my pride get in the way? Strangely, the worst part of the experience was remembering her words, "It's nothing personal." I felt like Tessio, one of Michael Corleone's enemies, knowing my fate was sealed. I toyed with the idea of confronting Susie's lover, fantasizing about ambushing him, but I quickly dismissed it. He was too young and strong, and I had no desire to end up in jail and miss out on my grandchildren's lives. My children considered disowning their mother, but I urged them against it. She may have lied and cheated, I reminded them, but she's still your mother. Suddenly, very rich, I thought. Susie and I divorced because of her wealth. Even before selling her house, she had generously shared our savings without touching my 401k. Financially, I came out well, but it didn't bring me happiness or satisfaction. I felt petty for wanting revenge on both her and her lover for humiliating me and shattering my faith in humanity and justice. It kept me up at night. I almost felt sorry for her, knowing her lawyer would likely take advantage of her and leave her high and dry. I watched as our children tried to reach her, only to be met with threats of financial disinheritance. To their credit, they ignored her threats, aware that when her boyfriend was done with her, she wouldn't have anything to leave behind. I took action by filing a complaint with the Bar Association and suing her lover for malpractice. To my surprise, his malpractice insurance settled out of court for enough to buy the condo I was renting, and he was disbarred. Every day, I hit the gym at the complex. I embraced my baldness, deciding a wig wasn't for me. I still had arthritis, but I was losing weight and gaining muscle. I spent sunny days at the community pool with my dog, who seemed to attract attention wherever we went. I found better luck with the second part of Father Ael's prescription. I started seeing Megan, a widow in her early 50s. Our first conversation revolved around our shared knee pain, which led to a lively discussion about the merits of different pain relievers. It was a stark contrast to the conversations I had in college, but relationships can begin over the most unexpected topics. Neither of us wanted to remarry or live together, which was a relief. Despite our physical limitations, we found enjoyment in each other's company. After our intimate moments, one of us would hobble back to our own apartment. I introduced Megan to cannabis gummies, and we often felt like carefree teenagers again. We weren't madly in love, but we enjoyed each other's company and trusted one another, a lot for our age. I was grateful to avoid the pitfalls of singles bars or online dating, where I could only imagine the awkwardness of posting about myself as a decrepit 60-year-old man seeking a younger partner. As for my ex-wife and her lover, they reportedly lived together for a few months. During their European vacation to meet his relatives, she bought him a Ferrari at the factory in Maranello, Italy. They stayed at a charming bed and breakfast near a vineyard in Tuscany, where she completed her romance novel, A Taste of Tuscany. I could only wonder what experiences she had there, especially after hearing her new partner had quite the reputation. Within 2 weeks, she sold the novel to a New York publisher. They traveled to Switzerland, where she bought him a gold Rolex at the factory store in Geneva. He convinced her to invest in a cryptocurrency venture based in Basel, Switzerland. Surprise, surprise, there was no business. He ran off with all her money and reunited with his wife. Susie was left burned and swindled in Switzerland. My children, despite her threats of secrecy, shared the news with me. If I were a better person, I might have felt sad, but I couldn't help laughing at the irony. Knowing how her boyfriend had broken her heart brought my own heartache back. After loving someone for so long, it's hard to simply switch off those feelings, but I was working on it. I no longer fantasized about revenge. She had managed to ruin her own life far beyond anything I could have imagined. It wasn't even about karma, it felt like an inevitable outcome that only a self-deluded person could miss. Like the Beatles said, "Can't buy me love," a truth she had ignored. Later, Susie called, unaware that I knew her lover had left her penniless. She claimed to have come to her senses and wanted us to be together again, professing her eternal love for me. I reminded her of the past year, where she suggested we shouldn't throw away 4 years over one mistake. One mistake? I replied. What do you consider a big one? She asked if we could start fresh and improve our marriage. I pointed out that we were no longer married. Then, a mischievous thought struck me. I told her I would consider taking her back if she sent me a check for $25,000 to show her goodwill. She began to cry, saying she shouldn't have to prove her love with money. I felt playful and said, "How about $55,000 instead?" Finally, she admitted that her lover had stolen everything and left her broke. I thought of some harsh words but held back. I chuckled involuntarily and replied, "There's no fool like an old fool." She sobbed, asking if I could lend her money for a ticket back to the States, citing our years together as worth something. I calculated those years in my mind and decided against it, eventually writing her a check for $1,000 for a plane ticket. Then, I blocked her on Facebook, my phone, and email. I included a note saying, "This isn't a loan or a gift, I'm paying you to never contact me again." I had moved on to someone new, Megan, a younger, more vibrant partner. As Tessio said in The Godfather, it's nothing personal. Dear listeners, sending loads of love to Ronald Burns for his contribution. And to all our listeners, thank you for being part of this literary journey with us. You can check out Ron's work on Amazon. We've shared the links in the description box below. If you want to share your work with us, please send it to the email mentioned in the description box, and we will publish it for our listeners at Lost Love Chronicles. Please share your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.